John Sandweg, former acting ICE director under the Obama administration, former acting director of the General Counsel at the Department of Homeland Security. John, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's take the politics out of it for a moment. What exactly are the problems with the U.S. immigration system that persist today?
Well, Secretary Mayorkas was dealt a difficult hand. He's right. There's incredible demand to come to the United States. And that's, a byproduct of how great this country is, how great our economy is, and the ability to find, improve your lot in life by getting to this country. The problem is we've never financed the system appropriately that deal with asylum claims in the U.S. And so the migrants have learned that if you make an asylum claim, that it could be years before DHS or the United States is in a position to deport you due to these longstanding laws. This problem didn't begin under the Biden administration. It began really at the tail end of the Obama administration, continued through the Trump administration, and now we're seeing it today. The problem, though, is Congress is just, as the situation at the border has changed and as we saw these increases in asylum, we really just never funded the officers and judges who make those decisions about whether you have an asylum claim, and those decisions are required before we can return you to your country. And that's really the crux of the problem we face today.
So from your previous experience, what is the best way to address the immigration issue? What is a tangible first step?
Well, look, I would like to see a surge of resources, right? Flood the zone with the rule of law. That is, bring in judges and asylum officers who can quickly process these claims, and then we can deport people quickly after they make the claim. I don't think we need to detain all these people. We've proven that ankle bracelets and other things are effective at kind of ensuring that they appear for court. The problem is we just never have, there's no court process, right? Now, some folks want to talk about changing the law. We could change the asylum law and limit the due process that individuals are entitled to. The bottom line, though, is it's just not realistic to expect Congress to change these laws. Now, the Biden administration is trying a new approach. They're going to roll out some new regulations beginning in May that are going to limit the ability of asylum seekers to make a claim if they transit through a country like Mexico. They've also been trying some new approaches to divert traffic from the immediate border. I think they're innovative approaches. Will be interesting to see how effective they are this summer. But the bottom line is I really think we should flood the zone with the rule of law, move these cases quickly, return people to their home country. And when people see that by making an asylum claim, it is not a ticket, a free pass to live in the United States for multiple years, but instead they go home quickly, I think you're going to see that, the demand or the flow at the border will drop dramatically.
Do you think we'll ever get past the backlog of asylum claims?
No, probably not. I mean, look, it is a huge number of asylum claims around the country. The backlogs in the immigration court have risen to record levels. We really only have about 600 judges. They're now processing well in excess of 1 million cases, in addition to the volume of new cases that come in every day and every month. I think it's going to be incredibly challenging to get through the backlog. And unfortunately, I think the better tactic here would be you focus on the new cases first so that we can stop the flow at the border. And then we can start thinking about strategies of how we are going to deal with the longer term, the backlog of cases and all the people have come in over the last 7 years.
How should Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas be responding to the issues at the southern border? And how do you feel that his hearings went in the last 2 days?
Well, I think Secretary is doing what he can, right? I mean, I think the Secretary has been aggressive in terms of trying to find innovative responses. Look, the bottom line is, and this is just the politics of border security, we can't control who comes up through Mexico or to presents themselves at the U.S. border. But consistently, especially, to be fair, during Democrat administrations, the Secretary is held accountable for the number of people who try to cross that border. It is very difficult for us. The Secretary has done a lot trying to put pressure on Mexico to do more to limit the flow of traffic through Mexico up to the border. The Secretary's come up with some innovative approaches to dealing with the border. But, we're dealing with the flow, trying to reduce the flow. But the bottom line is politically, a lot of this is out of your control, right? The volume, the desire of people to come to the U.S., the poverty and the gang violence in Central America that drives them to our border, and the fact that Mexico, doesn't do a lot to try to limit the flow of people coming through their country to our border are things that are always out of their control, the Secretary's control. And it doesn't matter if it's a Republican secretary or Democrat secretary, they're going to be held partially accountable for that flow. So difficult political hand they're dealt, for sure.
I want to ask about some of these specific moments, the discrepancies that we saw, him not being able to recall or comment on specific figures, not knowing the significance of those wristbands as well. How do you think that played? How did that look? And in your mind, does that speak to a level of incompetence there? Or would you expect him to not be briefed on every nuance and every detail?
Look, it's a challenge, right? You're up there in a very difficult political environment. Your staff is doing the best they can. I've prepped secretaries for those hearings on a number of occasions. Their staff is doing the best you can to prepare you for all the questions. Certainly want to demonstrate a command of the details, but at the same time, you are in this kind of rapid fire environment where you have a number of senators and House members asking you difficult questions. Look, I don't think the secretary himself should be accountable for every particular detail, but obviously you also want to demonstrate a command of the facts and the details because it builds confidence that you're doing your job appropriately.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.